The Sichos in Chelik of Hay, volume 25. This is the first Sikha for the Parshas of Vayishlach. And this Sikha is a Rashi Sikha. The Rebbe questions, the Pasuk says, after finally Yaakov left, went through uh, with Lavan and with Esav. So it says that Yaakov came to the city of Shem Sholem. He came whole. And the Rebbe and Rashi explains that it means that the bodily, monetarily, and his Torah was whole. The Rebbe asked various questions, but one big question is, why don't we just say he came whole because he escaped Lavan and Esau who were trying to destroy him? Why do we are looking for particular uh, things in which he was complete? And the Rebbe basically explains that the Eibishter promised him that he will be protected. So those things we don't find anywhere the pasuk should say, "Oh, what Hashem promised him that Hashem fulfilled it." That's obvious. So Rashi learns that this must be an additional something. The Sholem, as the Rebbe will explain, answers many questions, and also the Rebbe learns what it means for us in Yena Shel Torah, that the journey of Yaakov is all of his journey, and that while we have different challenges, our health, our physical, our monetary, our Torah. And in the end, we come out whole in everything. The Rebbe elaborates, explains each one of these details. We're learning this Sikha in loving memory of our dear son, Rav Levi Yitzchok, and this should benefit his soul. Teheinish Mosi Tzrura B'Tzrera Chaim, and we'll go in the Sikha step by step. Vayishlach. Aleph. From Pasik Vayovoy Yaakov Sholem Ir Shem. So the pasuk says Yaakov came whole, complete, to the city of Shechem. Zogn Chazal in Gemara. So our sages of blessed memory in the Gemara, they translate what does it mean Sholem. Und Rashi bringt das Arab Pirush ala Torah, and Rashi brings down this comment of the Gemara in his commentary on the Torah. As Sholem meant, what does it mean that Yaakov came whole? Three things. Sholem begufay, in his body he was whole. Sholem b'mamoinoi, he was whole in his money, and also Sholem b'toidosei, that he was whole in his learning, in his Torah. So the reason why we need to say this, because we know that physically Yaakov had an encounter and with the angel of Esav, and he was Tzaleya al Yerecha, he started limping, he was hurt by the Malach, and so we have to say that he was whole. We also need to say that the monetary, he gave a big gift to Esau. We have to also say that he was whole, that everything. But what about the Torah? So this we have two ideas. Let's look inside. There's Zogun for Sholem begufe Sholem b'mamayne, to say that he was complete bodily and is also complete monetarily, that he was whole, is neitik furish b'medrash. So that's important to tell us that he was whole, as the medrash articulates. He says, "Sholem begufay lifi shekosuv utzalei al yereichei chulu," because the pasuk previously said that he was limping on his thigh, that he was hurt. So we're saying now, no, but at this point he was whole. Sholem b'mamayne, where we say that he was whole monetarily. Aval Gav, the Medrash says, was tes shonim hoyi mechabed avinu Yaakov v'seisav b'isadirin, that in 9 years he gave him such a great gift to Esav. Yaakov gave Esav such a good gift that for 9 years he honored him with that gift. That means that there was so much. That's the extent of the large gift that Yaakov gave to Esav, Chulu. So we have to say he gave so much away, but he didn't lacking anything. And these two ideas are also quoted in Rashi. Al derech zeh, similar to this, steht in Pirush Rashi ala Torah. The Rebbe says why al derech zeh. There's a lot of the commentaries of the Mefarshim here, but we're just doing the Sikha. Al derech zeh steht in Pirush Rashi ala Torah. Similarly, we find in the comment of Rashi on the Torah, Sholem begufei zokt Rashi, shenisrape mitzalatoi, that he was healed from his limping. Sholem, his rib, from for the tzela, his side. Sholem b'mamoinoi, he was whole in monetarily, shelichoser klum ekoloisi doiren, that he wasn't lacking anything from that gift. But what is the meaning that he was sholem b'toirose? Why would we think that? Why do we have to say that he was sholem in the Torah? What was the reason? So we find a difference between Rashi in the pasuk on the Chumash and Rashi uh, in the Gemara. Aber if sholem b'toirose steht nicht im Medrash kein Pirush. In the Medrash we don't find a reason why would we think that we needed to say that he was whole in his Torah. Why would he lose Torah? In Pirush Rashi, in the Mastira, but in Rashi's commentary, we find a contradiction by Pirush L'Shas, as Rashi writes it in the Gemara, on the Gemara. Is there Mefarish over there? Rashi says, "Shalei tol shokach talmudei mipnei Torah chaderech." In the Gemara, Rashi says that he was whole in his Torah. He did not forget the trouble of the way, did not cause him to forget his Torah. Aber b'pirusha la Torah, but in Rashi's commentary on the Torah, Rashi gives the reason why are we saying that he didn't lose anything. Zokter sheleshokach talmudei b'Vayishlach, that he did not forget his learning in the house of Lavan. Either he could have forgotten it because of the trouble of the way, as the Rashi says in the Gemara, or the way Rashi says in the Chumash, it was he didn't forget it in the house of Lavan. So, how do we explain what the reason is between the difference between Rashi in the Gemara and Rashi in the Chumash? Darf man verstehen, was ist der Tam Hashinui zwischen den zwei Pirusha? What's the reason for the change of these two commentaries? Why do we say it's because of the trouble of the way, as Rashi says in the Gemara, and the trouble that, or the work in the house of Lavan, in the house of Lavan? What's the ideas behind it? But the Rebbe is going to argue that actually, according to Pshat, we should say Torah Chaderech seems to be more fitting for the simple meaning. In the verse, it says that he came whole when he came to Shechem. Shechem, he traveled to, by the time he came to Shechem, it's already was 18 months since he was journeying, summer, winter, and a summer, as the Rashi Bayis Sichos. So he was a while on the way. The Torah says, coming to Shechem, he was whole. Now, if we were saying that he was whole, that he didn't forget in the house of Lavan, why did the Torah remind ourselves, telling us about that he was whole in the Torah when he's coming to Shechem? I mean, that happened much before, that he didn't forget in the house of Lavan. Mele, if the Pshat is like the Gemara says that he didn't forget it in the trouble of the way, now is the time to say it. Because the 18 months he was traveling, and he didn't forget the Torah. That's why Sholem, he came to Shechem, he came Sholem. But if the Pshat is like Rashi, that in the Chumash, that he didn't forget in Beis Lavan, why are we saying it now? Nochmer. This is what I would ask. L'chayre is Ivra Mestam. It makes sense the other way around. The way in the Gemara it makes more sense, seemingly in Pshat. Bepirusha ala Torah, when Rashi comments on the Torah, where Rashi is mefared pshuta shel mikra, where Rashi explains the simple meaning of the verse, volt mer maskim given zu zogun, it would be more fitting to say davke than pirush ala shas. He should have said, really, the commentary that he says in the Gemara. Lo shokach talmudei mipnei Torah chaderech. He didn't forget his learning because of the trouble of the way. That's what Rashi should have said. Unit bebeis Lavan, not to say he didn't forget it in the house of Lavan. Why? From the pasuk zog doch, because what the pasuk is stating here, Vayova Yaakov Sholem Ir Shechem. He came to Shechem and he was whole. Was loit pshute mikro, when you're learning the simple meaning, darf oiskumen, so it should be, as der Sholem is a chidush in Zusammenhang mit Yaakov's Onkommen in Shechem. That when we say that he was whole, this is the chidush. The novelty is in association. When Yaakov comes to Shechem, he's whole. As if to say that could be that he wasn't whole. And now he came whole. It could have been not whole. So this has to do more, it would seem, with the trouble of the way, not with what happened before. In Medrash state, so now the Rebbe is going to compare this and check it, because the Rebbe learns that all these things, when he was healed from his injury, and when he was healed, and his monetary got the money back, the way the Rebbe learns it, it says Vayova Yaakov Shechem. That's when he was healed. It's all, this is the novelty coming to Shechem. And the Rebbe is going to say, but it seems like in the Medrash it's different. In Medrash state, as Yaakov is gleich ausgeheilt geworden mit Salato, from his limping, from his injury, he was immediately healed, not by the time he came to Shechem. Dur Vayishlach lo hashemesh, when the sun shined, that healed Yaakov from his injury. Similarly, the Medrash says with regards to the gift that he gave to Esau, the Eibishter filled him everything that he was lacking, that he missed out because he gave away all this to Esau, and immediately he got everything back. So according to this, he already was Gufay whole and Shalom b'mayne. Kumendik in Sukkot, when he came to Sukkot, the very first stop, Mer vi 18 Chadoshim Eideres in Shechem. This was 18 months earlier to coming to Shechem. His first stop after encountering with Esav was in Sukkot. So, you see, according to the Medrash, so the Rebbe wants to say that this Sholem makes more sense that it's taking place now by coming to Shechem, but the Medrash says no, that it happened immediately, that he was healed as soon as the sun shined, and he got back the amount that he spent on Esav immediately. So it's not right when it came to Shechem. But the Rebbe doesn't buy that in Pshat. In Pshat, the Rebbe said that it actually took place by the time he came to Shechem. 18 months later, it took a while for him to heal, took a while for the cattle to multiply, so to make up what he lost. Aber al derech Pshat is das alles given in an Eufen TV. Rebbe said in the Pshat, all this thing was in a natural way, the healing of Yaakov and the replenishment of his gift that he gave away was naturally. Side the refuah mitzalato, both the healing from his limping, unsai and his side, unsai der milui hachisarim b'mamayne, and also the filling of the lacking monetarily. And it's no miracle, it was naturally. Und das ist der Auftu von dem Posik, and that's what this Posik is coming to tell us. The novelty of this verse is telling about Yova Yaakov Sholem Ir Shechem. That Dafke, when he came 18 months later, as Kumendik in Shechem, is geworden Sholem. By the time he came to Shechem, he became whole. Weil demult hat sich beschleimes, because then completely, he was healed earlier, but when was he complete healing? In ganzen is geheilt begufe. When was he entirely, completely healed bodily? Uns ist this male geworden, and it was fulfilled durch Paros Verovis, because they kept on being fruitful and multiplying the cattle von sein Zoin from the Shivachulu. And that lacking from that whole gift, it took 18 months for it to be. And that's what the Pasuk is trying to tell us, actually. That Yaakov Shalom Shechem. By the time he came to Shechem, now everything was good. So that's not like the Medrash, that's Pshutish Mikra. So, is be Shloime Leuten Pirush Shaloi Shokach Talmudim Mipnei Torah Chaderach. So it makes sense more according to, we understand according to the interpretation that he didn't forget his learning because of the troubles of the way. So we understand why the pasuk is saying now hat nor zu sagen. So then there is room to say as komedik Shechem wo sich besetzt, while he came to Shechem where he settled. Kem shechakoso, the pasuk says vayikan as chelkas hasod gomer, he bought that portion of the field over there, so he settled down over there. Is given sholem b'terose. Now at this point he was still whole in his Torah, trotz dem Torah chaderach, despite the trouble of the way. Was redurkimach bizan kumen in Shechem, that he had to go through till coming to Shechem. So the way Rashi writes in the Gemara, that's very fitting. That's why it's taking place now as he's coming to Shechem. But according to the interpretation as Rashi brings down, that he didn't forget the learning in the house of Lavan, so this being whole in his Torah has no connection to sein Onkommen in Shechem. It has nothing to do that he came to Shechem. Die Shleimus is by him given by Mavegim from Beis Lavan. That wholesomeness that he didn't forget in the house of Lavan didn't take place now when he came to Shechem. That took place when he left the house of Lavan. Hein Favos zogt Rashi b'Pirush ala Torah. So why does Rashi say in the Pirush ala Torah Pshuta shal Mikra shaleshokach tamudim b'Beis Lavan? So why does Rashi choose to say that the Shalom is that he didn't forget his learning in the house of Lavan? That didn't change now. So Rashi has two choices to explain the Yaakov Yerushalayim. And Rashi chooses to explain that he didn't forget his Torah that he learned had in the house of Lavan, which took place many months before. Rashi should have said, like in the Gemara, like Rashi says in the Gemara, that he didn't forget it on the road, because that's happening now. Now, the Rebbe is explaining his kasha. The Rebbe is not saying that we can't say on the house of that he didn't forget it in the house of Lavan. The Rebbe is not rejecting that pshat al pi pshuta shel mikra, even though this happened a long time ago, because the Rebbe says maybe the pasuk is trying to say that the sholem in all three things happened now. Taka the sholem b'teirase took place as soon as he left Lavan's house. That's here when he came to Shechem. There was sholem also begufei nisrape mitzalate, that he got healed, and b'mamoina that nothing was lacking. Everything was replenished for him. And therefore, all three things, also the Torah, so that's why it's all inclusive. But since Rashi has a choice to teach it like in the Gemara, why doesn't Rashi say like the Gemara, that he didn't forget the learning on the road? Says nit kein kashe vikemen bechlal zog. The Rebbe says the parenthesis. It's not a question. How could you say at all as a pirush shalei shokach talmudei b'Beis Lavan, that he didn't forget the learning in the house of Lavan? Based the pasuk zog beferish. Yaakov Shalom erst ankumedik in Shechem. Torah said only when it came to Shechem. But here, how could you say that's not a question? How could you possibly say that he came to Shalom not forgetting the Torah that didn't take place in Shechem, that took place when he left the house of love? That's not a question. But Mekefan answered that you can answer. In Pesach steht doch nicht Shalom nor b'teros. It doesn't say specifically. It says it came whole. And not just so the Torah wasn't then, but it just says he came whole. Nor Sholem Stam. It just says he came whole. Kemen Zogen Kavonas HaKosuv. So we can say what the pasuk says Sholem, as Kumen Dikein Shechem, is Yaakov geworden in ganzen Sholem. That when he came to Shechem, he became entirely whole. In alle drei Sachen, in all three areas. Begufe b'meinu b'terose, bodily and monetarily and the Torah. Aber b'teirasa l'chud, but if we just want to talk about Torah, Zetaki given Shalom Echfrei, it was Shalom before. So this would not be a contradiction to that Pirush. We can say it was Shalom before, but now the Pasuk is telling when he came to Shechem, he was Shalom in everything, because the other two things of the three things that took place when he came to Shechem. So at that point, he was Shalom in everything. So we could learn uh like the Pshat, as Rashi says, that he didn't forget the Talmud Beslovan. But the shaila is, well, why does Rashi choose that? But we can say Takat that Tarasa also happened now because it didn't lose, I didn't forget the Torah on the trouble of the way. The shaila is over. The question is, since we have the ability to learn that the wholesomeness that remained in Torah is verbunden mit Yaakov's onkommen in Shechem. That is associated with coming to Shechem, that he was whole when he came to Shechem, because the trouble of the way. He did not forget, and he's whole. Why does Rashi choose? Farbintes u'bipirusha la Torah, in Rashi ties it, and his commentary on the Torah, Davke mitten Zman when Yaakov is given Vayishlach. Why does Rashi choose it to speak specifically about the time that Yaakov was in the house of law? Okay. The Rebbe wants to know, there's two possibilities of learning why is he Sholem be Teirosei, and the Rebbe asks that a Pipshat, it should have been better to say, like the Gemara says, that he was Sholem b'Teirosei when he came to Shechem, that didn't forget it because of the trouble of the way, rather than what Rashi says, that he didn't forget it in the house of Lavan, which took place some time ago. In his base, the Rebbe brings down in the Medrash, there's a fourth thing, that Yaakov came Sholem, and Rashi doesn't bring that down at all. It's not in the Gemara, but it's in the Medrash. And Rashi could have brought that down as well, that he was complete with all of his children, that when he came to Shechem, he came home with all of his children. So why does Rashi not say that? Base. Also, we need to understand, in Medrash bringt sich a vierte Sach, in welche Yaakov is given Shalom. In the Medrash, he brings a fourth item in which Yaakov was whole. Shalom bebonov. He was whole, complete with all of his sons. Lefisha kosuv boi im yovei Esav el hamachane ha'achas v'hikoyu, because the pasuk says, if Esav will come to one camp and he will smite them, he split up the children and the families into different camps. So if Esav comes to one and he smites them, then the next camp will be escape. But the pasuk is saying, no, he was whole, didn't have to escape, he didn't hurt anybody, it was solemn. Isn't it? Move on. So it's not understood. L'cheira is oich od der oifte for Sholem bebonov moving derech hapshat. This is also a logical thing that he came whole. Not not in medrash derech hadrash. It's not just the medrash by way of expounding. This is pshat. Pavos bringt Rashi b'pirusha la Torah. So how come Rashi in his commentary on the Torah, the Mloshna Gemara dafke? Why does he bring the Gemara, the three? Was wird nicht gebracht Sholem bebonov? It doesn't bring down the Sholem bebonov. What's the reason for that? And now this would also have the same problem like the Rebbe had with the Terose, that this happened earlier, but we see that Rashi did bring down, is not bothered by it, because Rashi talked what happened in the house of Lavan, that he was Sholem Terose, so also Sholem B'Monei Now, so why does Rashi doesn't bring the Medrash and brings the Gemara? And the Rebbe says, but it's surprising because Rashi has already brought down that the road has an impact on children. And Hashem blessed, when it came to Avram, when he sent Avram, he blessed him with shouldn't Ma'atis Peri Verivia, it affects. So Sholem Bebonov is seems to be a fitting thing to say. It, to me is not aggressive. The surprise is even greater. In One Parshas Lech, in the beginning of the Parshas Lech Lecha, where the Zelden Birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Avram, over there, it's related the blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Avram. So it says, "Ve'eschol Godel Gomer." Is Rashi Mefarish? Rashi explains, "Lefi shehad derech goyremes lishloisho dvorim." Does that make you the big nation? Why is Hashem make a big nation? Because the road, Hashem is sending on the road causes three things. Mema'etes piri verivia. It diminishes the being fruitful and multiply, children. Mema'etes is money, it diminishes money. Mema'etes is Hashem. And it also diminishes the name. That's why Avram needed these three blessings that the Eibishter gave him. He's promised him, he promised him for the sons. Zetman. So what do we see from that by Avram? As Abrocha Bekesher Lebanim is an Inyan Ikri, that a blessing that comes in association to children is something important. A main thing was Venice is also in the Amiut, when it is likely or it's possible to make a diminishing durch Tiltla Derech by going on the road. So is by Posuk by Yove Yaakov Sholem, Yaakov came Sholem from them Derech as Asher Anochi Hilach. On the road that he was going, he came Sholem from this Derech, from the road. Had Rashi gedacht Mefarish sein, so Rashi should have interpreted that Sholem meant Sholem Bebanov, that also means hole in his sons, because a road usually can impact that, and that's why it was necessary for a bracha, and that's why Abram got such a special bracha before he went on the journey that Hashem sent him, that is not going to affect him. So this would make sense for Rashi to bring down the medrash that it was Sholem also Bebanov. Yeah. So the Rebbe says to understand it, we have to understand the general section, general question. Why is Rashi dealing about details that he came b'mamoina, b'gufay, b'terose? Why not say he came whole from all of his encounters with Esav and with Lavan? He was subjected to a lot of difficulties, and he came out whole. Why does Rashi not explain the general idea? Never explains that's not necessary for the pasuk to say, because Hashem already promised him for that. So we have to say these are new things. Vetman dos verstehen Gimel. We'll understand this by Hagdim Atmiya Klolis in the Pirush Rashi to understand some generally question, a surprise in this Rashi. Learning the pasuk by Yove Yaakov Sholem Yishrem, when we read this verse, Yaakov comes whole to the city of Shem. Noch nariches hasiper wie Yaakov is nitzel geworden von Lovenen und Esav. After the long story, Yaakov was saved from Lavan and then Esav. So it should have turned out as that Iker HaPirush for Vayova Yaakov Sholem is Bepashtus. What does it mean that Yaakov came Sholem? As it is ungekumen ganz, that he arrived whole, unbeschädigt von Lavan und Esav, not hurt, not damaged from Lavan and Esav. Rashi allein is gleich mefarish in Adibra Masklaches. Rashi himself explains in the following Rashi that opens up after this. It says that when he came from Padan Aram, what is the pasuk saying? He came Sholem Bevoye when it came. What is the emphasis when it came Padan Aram? So Rashi says coming from Padan Aram, which is like it's like one person would say to his friend, this individual came out from the teeth of the lions and he escaped in whole. He's whole. Afkan, here too, he came home from Padan Aram, Milovim ve'Esav from Lavan and Esav that have attached to him on the way, causing him trouble on the way. So Rashi said that's what mipadan haro. So why does Rashi not say by Yova Yaakov Shalom that from the people that try to hurt him, from Lavan and Esav? Oh, but Rashi zok, but Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says the opposite. Rashi pshuta shel mikra as Yaakov, not the opposite, but Rashi is different. Rashi says Yaakov Yova Yaakov Shalom is nicht bescheiches zu sein Hatzola von der Sakona mitzad Lavan Esav. Saying that he came whole is not in connection in the danger that he was exposed to from Lavan and Esav. That's not what the Shalom is, nor Aklozik Ishlemus. We're talking about something general, a wholesomeness, b'shaychus to gufa b'mayim v'terose, as it relates to his body, to his money, and as to his Torah. So why does Rashi say that? And we say them is that more than just saying, why does Rashi say that? How does Rashi know that? Where do we learn this from? Why don't we just say, Yaakov Yaakov Shalom, he came out in peace. He escaped Lavan and Esav who wanted to hurt him. And just in this alone, what are we saying? As Sholem begufay meant when we say he's whole within the Sholem begufay. What are we saying? Which part of gufay? Even when you're saying, well, his body was saved. Why don't you say body was saved from the enemies who tried to destroy him? No, we're saying no. I should say the body doesn't mean that they couldn't hurt us physically, but it means that he was saved from his limping, from the fact that he was hurt by the malach. So why does Rashi not learn Sholem simply? Now, the Rebbe says maybe the word Sholem means that was something lacking, like we're saying, well, he gave away money to Esav and now he got it back, so something missing. Or we say that he was hurt, he was limping and he was hurt and now he got better. But we can't say just Sholem saved when nothing. Sholem implies, perhaps Rashi, the Rebbe wants to suggest, maybe Sholem implies that there was something missing first and now you got better. But we can't say this about, so what is limping and about his money we can say. But the Rebbe says, but we still say Sholem on Torah. You can't say this by Torah. And actually later, look inside. I can nicht sagen, as der Hechrich is von dem Lashon Sholem. We can't say that we're forced to learn that it means something else, not saved from Esav and Lavan, because the language Sholem means whole, for welches is mashma. You say the word whole, it appears, as Fried is given a chesoron, that before there was a lacking, und nor a chesoron, and not totally, it was lacking. It was, but it was lacking. Und der noch is just nicht lang geworden, and then it was completed. So the word Sholem means there was lacking before, not something that was missing totally, and not that it was always there, but missing and it was complete. And maybe that's why Rashi says the body he was limping, the money he gave away. Besides the fact that Rebbe says, as in the Pirush Rashi Lachar Hanal, in the Rashi that follows, that we mentioned earlier, just before, Zokter Beferish Loshen Sholem, Rashi used the word Sholem, B'shaychus, Tzuahat Sholem, Eben Shinei Arayis. He came out Sholem from the teeth of the lions. He wasn't lacking anything, he was just in danger. Is from them Pirush Rashi Gufra Muchachazeh, but we don't need next Rashi, this Rashi itself. Or in Rashi Zokter, Rashi says the word Sholem, B'teirosah Shalei Shokach Talmudei. It's not that he forgot and he got it back, so it was never lacking. Can't say that Sholem means that it was missing and then it was taken back, because you don't say it by Talmud. So Sholem could mean that it was whole, Zetman as afal pias lepoilis ba'im kein chesoren nit given. So we see, even though there was no actual lacking in the Torah, pas zu sagen der Reif, sholem mitzadem efshoris lachisorim. You can still say whole because there was a possibility of lacking. It doesn't mean that it was mamish lacking to say sholem. Kann man doch sagen dasselbe wenn geht zu Atzalos im Esav Loven. So why don't we say the same thing from saving from Esav Loven? Can't answer me because Shalom cannot meet to protect from Esav and Loven because you have to be lacking. No, by Torah you see it's not lacking. The Rashi says Shalom b'shem b'shin arois. The word, that's not a good answer, the Rebbe says. So the question remains, and this Rebbe asked a surprising question: why does Rashi not say that it was Shalom by Yovei Shalom Yishem that he became saved from Lavan and Esav without saying that, talking about the body, talking about the money, what just generally was saved from Esav and Lavan. And the Rebbe explains now that this was already a promise that he had generally, that Hashem is going to protect him. And the pasuk doesn't have to say that Hashem did what he promised, something else, something in addition. Dalet. We can say the explanation. As soon as Yaakov went to Choron, hat ihm der Eibishter maftiach, when God promised him, V'hine anochi imach, I am with you, ushmarticha b'chol asher telach, and I will guard you wherever you go. Was das mean? Pshutish mikro l'chol reish. What that means in the simple meaning of the pasuk, first and foremost, it means the shmira von Esav Lovan, the protection from Esav Lovan. Rashi is dort mefarish, as Rashi explains it, because he was afraid in Esav and Lavan, so the Eibishter promised him that he's going to protect him. So therefore, the pasuk doesn't have to emphasize that the promise of Hashem was fulfilled. When Yaakov is angekommen Sholem, and then the Yaakov came whole from Esav and Lavan. This is moving Melov. That Esav and Lavan weren't able to affect him. This is something which is self-understood. The pasuk doesn't have to emphasize that. Well, we don't find that Hashem promised Abraham. We don't find that pasuk to say, well, Hashem kept his promise. Abraham, Hashem promised him, Kenal sim beis by onzog lech lecha. Eibishter told him, "Be'eschel goy godel goymer." They'll make him to a great people. As the tiltul haderech, the Eibishter promised him to Abraham that this traveling of the road, that by him nit memayt sein von der shloisha dvorim, that's not going to diminish of the three things. Gefindt man nit as der pasuk soll ergets matgish sein. We don't find that the pasuk should somewhere emphasize as kachave that happened. Abraham sholem u'kiyitzbei. Abraham came in peace. We don't see the pasuk. Why is the pasuk saying this by Yaakov? Just to say that Hashem fulfilled his promise? We don't find that. That's why Rashi learns that we're not talking about a wholesome to stay complete, which is included part of the promise of Hashem. Eibishter told him, that was the promise, that I'm with you, I'll guard you. That thing we don't have to emphasize. If the Eibishter is saying shalom, it's something in addition. Nor wegen murois miyuchodis, but this is talking about special happenings, that those happenings sein Olul zu goydem sein, as Yaakov soll nicht sein shalom. They might cause Yaakov not to be whole, notwithstanding nit kukendik, notwithstanding of Avtochas HaKadosh Baruch Hu now, of the God's promise. Hashem promised him, and yet it's probably possible that it shouldn't be sholem, and that would not go against Hashem's promise. And the pasuk is telling you, is Afal Pekim B'Yov Yaakov Shalom became sholem. What are these things that Rashi can find to say that Hashem promised him, and yet, even if it wouldn't happen, he would still not go against what the Eibishter promised him, and he could be lacking, and the pasuk is telling him, no, it wasn't lacking. And the phone was the pasuk zok shalom stam, and the fact is the pasuk doesn't talk about something specific, just as whole, is muchach Ados is given nit nor in ein prat. It wasn't just in one. It was whole. Nor sholem kipshuto in alle seine pratim. But it was whole in all details. Und da seien die drei Inyonim, was Rashi rechnet, these are the three aspects that Rashi counts, that he was whole. All of these three Inyonim, even if he wasn't whole, would not go against his promise that the Eibishter promised him. And the Rebbe is going to explain now. But still, the Pasuk says, V'yov Yaakov Sholem, that he was Sholem. Sholem begufoi shenisrape mitzalater. He was whole bodily, that he was healed from the limping from the injury. Das was Yaakov is given to Leah al Yerecha. He was limping on his thigh. He's given a tetzov from sein milchama mitzore shaleisov. That was as a result of a war that he had with the officer of Esav, Amalach. Ashlich von Eberstein. He was an agent from Hashem. Bald ados is an inyan was his giton geworden. To Yaakov, and this is a matter that was done to Yaakov, Mezet Tamshu, whatever the reason is. But the angel went and did this to Yaakov. Durch HaMalach Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through an angel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is move on. It's understood that das hat nicht zu tun mit dem, was wird bewarnt. That has nothing to do with that which is being warned, protected in the Avtoch Shmarticha von Esav Eloven. That's separate. That is not part of the promise that I will guard you from Esav and Lavan. The fact that he was had to do with an injury from an angel. So that was one thing that we have to say was Sholem. Sholem that he wasn't lacking anything from the whole gift. Euch noch geben Esav kol even after giving Esav the entire gift, is by Yaakov geblieben at a chush godel. Yaakov was remained with a great fortune. As understood from the simple meaning of the verses. Since he had remained with plenty, I feel even by Yaakov nicht nismal geworden. The chesron adoren, even by Yaakov would not be fulfilled. The lacking of the gift, wollte es noch nicht gemindert. In Kim Avtochas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this would not diminish the promise, the fulfillment of Hashem's promise. I'm going to guard you. I'm not going to neglect you. The Pasuk says there, he'll have the minimal. Yaakov had all this stuff that would not diminish from it. And yet, so that wouldn't go against his promise. But yet, the Eibishter Mamalig when them ganzen Chisoren, the Eibishter filled the entire lacking from that whole gift. Not that he didn't have plenty left, but the Eibishter gave it back to him. And Sholem B'terosoi, Shleshok Talmudi B'beis Loven. They completed it, they didn't forget the learning in the house of Loven. The Nesinas Mokum Yaakov soll vergessen Talmudi B'beis Loven. What is there a room? Why do we think that Yaakov might forget in the house of Lavan? We're saying he didn't forget it. Why would the house of Lavan be a place where he forgets his learning? Is nicht zu lieb der Wirkung von Yaakov sein zusammen mit Lavan Rasha. It's not because the influence and the impact that Yaakov is together with the evil Lavan. Of them what Yaakov gebeten beshavti b'sholem. Yaakov already asked, I should return in peace, and Rashi explains, I want to come back whole, not to sin, so I don't learn from the ways of Lavan. That was part of Yaakov's prayer. We didn't need, say, Yaakov would learn. That was Hashem's promise. But and that became fulfilled. He did. Yaakov had geschickt zogen Esav. And Yaakov actually said to Esav, in love Rosh Garti, I lived with Lavan, and I keep the 613 mitzvahs. And I did not learn from his evil ways. So we're not worried about, we're not saying that he became whole in his Torah because he could have learned from Lavan and be influenced by him. That's not the issue. We know that that's not the case. Norval Yaakov is in base Lavan Yevem Farnumen. But Yaakov was very busy. He was entirely devoted. He was a shepherd of the flock. He was devoted to his work. According to Torah, you have to be devoted to the work that you're doing. He said, saying to his wife when he was running away that I worked with your father with all my koyach. During the daytime, I was the heat, and the nighttime the cold. But and I couldn't sleep. He worked very, very hard. And if them in that way, he worked like this for 20 years. Is verstanden the Chiddush Achigodlo understood the great novelty as nit geguckt of them all, notwithstanding all this that he was busy for 20 years working in such a demanding and in such a devoted way. Is Leshokach Talmudim Vayishlach, he didn't forget his learning. Great novelty. But der Chiddush is aber nicht verbunden mit Avtochas HaKadosh Baruch Hu u'shmarticha b'chol hashtelach. But that's not connected to the promise that I'm going to guard you where you go. The Eibishter is guarding him anyways, but that doesn't include that he's not going to forget the Torah that he's learning there. Borum ben Yaakov vernimmt sich mit dem Oif Molocha Zaydig Ubese. That was should be a natural outcome of being busy. You can't have time to learn. And it had nothing to do with him on the road. He's not losing because of the road, because if he's home and he's busy and he's not learning Torah because he's busy in his job, he would also forget, it would seem. He would need a special blessing not to forget the learning. So it had nothing to do with Hashem's promise that the road isn't going to affect him, because this is nothing to do with the road. It has to do in his preoccupation. Und das ist der Chiddush im Posuk, Vayova Yaakov Sholem B'terosei. Sheleshokach Talmudim V'Vayishlach. That's the Chiddush, that he didn't forget the learning in the house of Lavan. So Rabbi explained now these three things, why they are the suspect that he might have suffered, because first of all, that came from an angel. That's not included in Hashem's promise. For whatever reason, Hashem wanted him to have that injury. And we don't know. That doesn't mean that Hashem promised him. And the pasuk says he came shalom. It means in every aspect. What are the aspects? So we have to include everything. So first of all, he was healed because it's not part of the promise. Also, the monetary. Why did Hashem have to fulfill everything? He still had enough, so that wouldn't be not the fulfillment of the promise. And also the learning would also be, because that's a natural, because he was busy with the learning, not because he learned from Lavan. That was just because he was busy working. So the Torah tells us, show him all these things he wasn't lacking. So now the Rebbe says we understand why we can't say the Shalom Bebonov that the Rebbe brought before, and also the trouble of the way. Rashi can't learn that. This way, it already fall to the side the questions automatically of this explanation. The two above mentioned surprises in Sif Aleph and Beis, a Pirush Rashi that we asked on Rashi. Rashi cannot bring in the meaning for Shalom Bebonov. Rashi cannot bring the idea that he was kids, that he was Shalom, because as Esav had nit gekent orin Bono Shel Yaakov, that Esav could not touch them. Hoye machna achas v'yirko im yove Esav goymer. Das wird doch nichlol in Avtochas HaKadosh Baruch Hu shmarticha goymer. That's part of the Eibishter's promise. We don't need to tell you a chiddush that's Shalom. Und der Posuk darf es nicht erzählen genau. The Posuk doesn't have to relate that. So we don't have to tell you about watching the kids, because that's part of the Abish's promise that Esav, they will not be able to impact his children. That's why Rashi and the Torah cannot explain. That what means Shalom B'Terosi, that he didn't forget his study because the trouble of the road. While Oich Der Inyan, the trouble of the road is promised, is Nichlan Avtochas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That was already promised by Hashem. It's not a Chiddush of Shalom. Ushmarticha b'chol asher teilcha, I'll guard you in everything you go. So forgetting the learning because of the travels, that would be against that promise. He was promised for that. Hashem will protect him, will guard him from any undesirable thing that might happen, was the halicha. Koilel the tilta haderech, which includes that trouble of the way, can guide him zay. It says, Shmarani baderech hazeh shanei cheilach. Guard me in this way that I'm going. So that means that that's part of already the promise. Al derech birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaAvrom. This is similar to the blessing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaAvrom. As ein tiltel haderech vet bei ihm nit memayit sein for the shlesh advorim, that his going on the road is not going to take away from these three things. So this was also by Yaakov, and therefore there's not a chiddush over here that's shalom. So therefore, these two possibilities that Rashi doesn't bring down, that his sons weren't hurt, that was shalom, that we don't need that, because that's already a protection. Also, the fact that he didn't forget the Torah because of the trouble of the way, that's included in Shmarticha. But the fact that he didn't forget the Torah based Lavan, that would be a natural result. So why does the that we need the special promise that Shalom that he didn't forget that. So now the Rebbe is going to Yenus Torah explain what it means in our avoda, that while we are like Yaakov goes down to Golus, he goes to Choron, and yet we can stay whole in all of these areas, as the Rebbe will explain each one of the areas. Miyena shal Torah in Pirush Rashi. So from the wine of Torah in Rashi, not Geret, that we had spoken as the halicha for Yaakov and Ken Choron is Meragmez Evalichas Bonov, that Yaakov's descent to Choron is a hint of his children travels. Bnei Yisrael, Umaisa obviously Mulabonim, and what happened to the father is a sign for the sons in Golus. That represents his son going to Golus. Zog der Posik, the Posik says, Vayova Yaakov Sholem Ir Shechem, that Yaakov came home, Lel Shechem, Asher Be'eretz Canaan Bevoya Mipadan Aram. That when you come in the land of Canaan from Padan Aram, you're going to come Shalom. That Eibishter is Maftiach. God promises, Yeder in every Jew, as wird sich umkehren Shalom ganzer Heit von Golus, that he will return, he'll come back complete, whole from exile. Is Rashi Mevaron Moisiv, so Rashi explains and adds, as das was Lovan the Ace of Kenan, mitzad atzmai, that the fact that Lavan and Esav on their own need to ondirin Aid, they can't touch a Yid. Und Yaakov kommt on Shalom ken Eretz Yisrael, and Yaakov will come whole in Eretz Yisrael. That's not the Chiddush. That's Pashut. That is a listen to Pshita. That's obvious that will be whole. That the Eberster's promise. Nidosis that oiftu from Vayova Yaakov Shalom. That's not the novelty that Yaakov comes whole. Of demo the Eberster Machatchila Maftir given. That was already to begin with. Hashem promised. Nach Eider Mizarop in Golus, before going in Golus, the Eberster says, I'm with you and I will guard you wherever you go. Nobody has the power to touch a Yid, God forbid. The Chiddush is, the novelty is, as a feeling in the inyonim was lecheira, even in those areas, in those aspects that it would seem, B'tzad dem seder v'sis euch gestalt milmailo, according to the order as it's set up from above, is faran an ort, so there is room. As Golus or Poil sein a chisonin in a Yidden. So maybe Golus can impact a lacking in a Yid. There is some areas that it would seem that it could. Bis as bepoil vert a chison. And to the extent that actually there is a lacking. It's able to be a lacking and it has lacking. So the Posik by Yova Yaakov Shalom. The Posik says Yaakov comes home. As der chisorin is nit ken emissary, that's not a true lacking. Says blois an inyan if you show it's only temporary. Over safe. In the end, ver der chisorin bottle, vayove Yaakov shalom. This lacking is nullified, and in the end, Yaakov comes complete. Anyways, even that lacking that is temporarily, in the end, it comes shalom. Und da seine die drei Inyonim, was Rashi sagt, Kidl. These are the three areas that Rashi says as later as the Rebbe continues now. Zayin. Sholem begufesh and Isrape mitzalate. He was whole in body. He was healed from his side, from his limping. Einer von the Elohim in der Avodah in Zman HaGolusis, one of the elevations, the advantages in the service in the time of Golus is the Avodah from Mesiras Nefesh. That's the service of self-sacrifice. Was der Far kumen Rachmon Islam the Yisudei HaGolus Chulu. That's why, God forbid, we have the pains of exile. Als Nisoyen, they come as a test. Menasa Hashem Elekechem Eschem, the Eibishter is testing you and raising you, Kedei Tzayrush Rufen by Yidden Inyan HaMesiras Nefesh, in order to bring out by a Yid the idea of self-sacrifice. Und das ist der Inyan, and this is the idea of a Sorei Shel Esov, Hot Vayiga Bekaf Yerecha Shel Yaakov. The officer of Esov touched at the side of the thigh of Esau of Yaakov. When the Rambam is mevayer divra medrash al aposik, the Rambam explains the words of the medrash of the verse. Noga b'chol hatzadikim sha'asidim liyis mimenu. He actually touched all the righteous that are destined to come from Yaakov. That touch, Zadeda Shel Shmat. This is the generation when the Yidden were destroyed. The generation of the destruction of Yidden. The Derech Shishmat wanted to force the Yidden and destroy the Yidden. And this is the remes of the Yisuri HaGolus. This is a hint for the pains of exile. Bis in dem Rachmon Litzlan Schwerst Neufen, and God forbid, in the most difficult way, the pains, the Yisurim. Because the Yisurim seinen kedei zu der Wecken bei Eden zer Mesiras Nefesh. The reason for these pains is to arouse, to wake up by Yidden their self-sacrifice. So God forbid you can think, as bald the Yisurim kumen be'emes nit von Esov lamato. Since these pains don't come from Esov below, nor from Sorei Shel Esov, but it was the officer of Esov, the Malach, sein Kumen mil Meilu bichdei Arus zu bringen bei Eden Mesiras Nefesh. He comes from above in order to bring out by Eden the self-sacrifice. Seine sehr Metzias Amitis, was hat Akim Chas v'Sholem. So therefore, it's a true existence that they can last, God forbid, because they're here with a mission to bring about Mesiras Nefesh. That's why we have this cautioning. Sholem begufesh and Isrape mitzalate. That he became whole, that he was healed from this tzalate. As that after we accomplish and we go through the service in Golus, werden die Yisurim in ganzen Bottle. These pains are not lasting, they become totally nullified. Nisrape mitzalate, he is healed from the limping ba'ifan as it is sholem, so that he is complete. To begin with, it wasn't a true entity. Nor it was a test. If Megala sein dem Teike from Mesiras Nefesh for Ayidin to reveal the force of self-sacrifice of Ayid. Yes, the next thing comes Shalom b'Mamayni, Shalechasar klum mikol oisei doirin, that he wasn't lacking anything from the whole gift. The tachlis from Golus, the goal of exile is not as the Rida lanes or the Funa Riskum and Gans Shalom. Not just that the Yid himself should come out unscathed, whole, and complete. Nor as soll euch übermachen den Yonim from Golus, that also that he should change over the aspects of exile and make them his money. To turn it around to holiness. Aderech Yaakov, similar Yaakov, is nicht nur allein Nitzel geworden von Lavan Esau. Not only was he himself bodily that he was saved from Lavan Esau, der hat mitgenommen von Lavan, but he took along from Lavan Aribu Otzum a tremendous and awesome amount. Lavan hat gesagt, Lavan said about what Yaakov took, Kol Asher Atorei Elihu, everything you see belongs to me. When he caught up with Yaakov. He also accomplished to turn Esav around. As smooth as was Esav to Gewalt Hagen. Besides, instead of Esav wanting to kill him, Esav ran, he hugged him, and he kissed him. To such an extent that, according to the opinion of Shimon Yochai, he says, at that point, it was with all of his heart. Although there is a rule, a halacha, that Esav hates Yaakov, but at that point he did it with all his heart. So we see that Yaakov changed around. He took along the monetary from Lavan. He changed around Esav, that he hugged him and he kissed him at that moment. Und das ist der Hachone, and this is the preparation to the Mzman, to the time from when nicht nur to the Zman von V'olu Meshim Barzien, Lishpet es har Esav v'hoisol Hashem HaMelucha. And the Yidden will go up as saved to the Mount Zion to judge the Mount of Esav. V'hoisol Hashem HaMelucha. The kingdom will be to Hashem. Nit nor vetmen mishpeten Esav. Not only will we judge Esav, nor v'hoisol Hashem HaMelucha. That's the kingdom. Will be to Hashem. He will recognize the governance, the kingdom of Hashem. Rambam, to use the language of the Rambam, Mashiach will correct in V'olu Meshim at that time to fix the world to serve Hashem be together. Shnemar, the Pasuk Novi says, I will turn all the nations, to all call the name of Hashem. So when we're talking about the Esav, we're not talking about just judging him, but actually turning him around. Just as Yaakov accomplished this through the gift, that's how Esav ran to him, and he changed his heart at that time. And before davening. Similar is by every Yid. In order to sort out and to turn it around to Gedusha, the Inyonim from Welt Esav, the matters of the world, the Esav, to turn to Gedusha. Ubefrat from Golus, especially matters of Golus, especially, Darfel Achrei Agdomas Avedis Atfilo. So after first davening, as Yaakov did, prayed, And then gave the gift, Oisnutzum von seinem Moment, Chulu, Viadoiren. Then you have to utilize your monetary, it's like a gift. Gitman von Seinsmann, then you give from your time. He plows and he sows and you do work. So you give it away to Esau, basically, you give it away to the world. You should have spent the time in Torah and then you're giving it away. What's going to happen with the Torah? So you're giving it away as a gift. Why are you giving it to the gift? Because you're trying to sort out, you're giving that gift to the world because you want to sort them out. Das heißt, which means, lässt sich herab in Welt. You lower yourself down to the world. Und vernimmt sich mit Inyonim Gashmim, and you occupy yourself with physical matters. Chulu. Charisha chulu. Beloshen hayedua, to use the known language, sich onton in levushav mizbarer, to dress yourself up into the garments of what you're trying to sort out. You dress yourself up into the Gashmis, into the world. In order to be able to impact the world. So the biking were in the Shaila. So then the question be, okay, that's an important all the Aveda is not in an Eifel from Nisoyan. Since this is not a test, the test is not true, as we said before, it's only testing. But this is not Nisoyan, but this is Nitke Metzias Amitis. That's not a true. Nor an Inyan shall be the this is to sort the world. If you machen Welt to change the world, was das is Ametzias Amitis, that's a true entity existence. Then there's lacking in the monetary in order in order to accomplish, change the world around. So you have to invest and you're actually losing. Das heißt, die Iride von sein Keuches was money in Gashmus Oilom, that your descent of your powers and your time in the physical world is Chaz v'Sholom Adover Shokayoma. Maybe this, God forbid, this is something lasting. Bavonut men, so that's why the Pasuk says Sholem. Azoich derech Sodom v'Yiride is not lefisho. Also, that lacking and that descent is only temporary. Und seif wird Yid und bleibt Sholem ebelmen. In the end, the Yid remains Sholem also monetarily. B'shas men geht zu der Geula. When we go to the redemption, nimmt man mit euch the Gashmis und the Chosu von Ayid. We take also along the physicality and the assets of a Yid in an Eifen as Yivert Sholem. It becomes whole. Bishleimus, Nis'alev, Nichlos, and Kedusha. It's complete, elevated, and also included the Kedusha. And finally, number 3, Sholem b'teirose shaloi shokach Talmudei b'veis love, and didn't forget the Torah in the house of love. The Inyan from Talmud Torah b'shleimusei, to completely on the fullest level to study Torah, Fodder Taprishus from Vel demands to be separated from the world. Like we find by Yaakov, as that is given Yoshev Aholim, that he was sitting in the tent, Unitman bebeis Medroshe Shalever Yudalat Shono, that he was hidden in the study hall of Aver for 14 years. Tainet Ayid, so his argument, man want von ihm zu vernehmen sich mit die Berurim, since it's demanded of a Yid to occupy himself with sorting things out, Berurim from Golus, in Mokamagol, in the place of exile, is doch nicht shaykh as soll anhalten b'shas meise sein darge nihilus in Torah, so it doesn't fit that at the same time he should hold on at the same time to his elevated level in Torah. Zakbenim, we tell them as Yaakov lo yishokach Talmudu b'veis love, and Yaakov did not forget the learning in the house of love. By the free Diketzvei Inyonim, by the previous 2 matters, Gufa and Mamoinai, can verily fishachis on bepoil. Over there could be lacking, actually. Or the noch vertes nimshlam. Later on, it's complete, it's made up. Aber wenn ich gehe zu Teure, can by Yaakov Melchat Chila kein Chesoren nicht werden. When it comes to Teure, by Yaakov to begin with, there could be nothing lacking. Warum? because kipis gam kveit kedushas mericha madmur, as the saying of my father-in-law, the Rebbe, quote, Nor unsere Gufim seinen übergegeben in Golus v'shibut Malchus. It is just our bodies that have been given over into exile and the enslavement of the governments. Aber unsere Neshamas, but our souls hat been in Golus nit vertrieben, have not been chased into exile, unishibut Malchus nit übergegeben, and they were not given over to the enslavement of the governments. Is the kavone in them. So therefore, it does not even touch the yid's learning. The kavone in them need nor kipashtus haloshen. It's not only as the simple meaning in the movement from golus kipshutis, in the meaning literally golus as malchus hobnit kin shlita for neshama, that the governments cannot dominate the soul nor nochmer. As the avoida mit golus, also when you work with the golus, ritnit on the pnimis haneshama v'secher v'golus, that does not touch the inner of the soul, which is higher than exile. So the avoida with golus cannot be touched. Yerida from dem odam in golus, zum mevare sein din yole ha-golus, those, the descent of the person to exile to sort out the matters of golus is blois negayet the chitzonis haneshama, that also only touches the externality of the soul. Aber in the neshama atzma, but in the soul itself, welcher is in golus nit vertrieben, which has not been chased to golus, is nechayich ken yerida chas v'sholom. It doesn't apply. There's no descent. To begin with, there's no descent. It's like by saying by Torah shalashakach talmuda, it stays in its complete level as always. Und der Rebbe lashakach talmuda v'veislava didn't forget his learning. The Torah was Yaakov, what you learn sein dik nit man beprishus from Welt. The Torah that he learned while he was hidden, separate in the world, is by him geblieben ganz euch bebayis that remained whole in the house of Loven. That was never impacted to begin with. Umaisa obviously in the bonim, the act of the fathers is a sign for the sons. Every yid has the power given from Yaakov, as nit nor sein sholem arois gehen from Golus. Not only should he be whole going out of Golus, so then he will be whole. Nor afilu b'shas Golus gufa. Even during the time of Golus, while you find yourself in the house of Lavan, Kenner sein in Adarge von Lashokach Talmuda, you can be in the level not to forget the learning. Seine Ruchnis, die Kinyonim bleiben ganz. His spiritual matters remain whole. Sholem b'Torosei, complete in his Torah. Sichos Shabbos Parshat Vayishlach, Tovshin Mem Gimel.